I'm Gabriel, and this is The Rare Mind. Today we're diving into why INFJs and INTJs often feel punished by dating apps. Not because they're doing anything wrong, but because depth doesn't survive in a swipe economy. Stay with me till the end, because I'll give you a complete system to outsmart the algorithm without losing your soul. The screen glows. 100 faces flicker by in seconds. To an INFJ or INTJ, this isn't merely a marketplace of attraction. It's a silent referendum on depth. The punishment here is subtle but real. Invisibility. The slower mind, the symbolic gaze, the thought before response. These traits don't compute well in systems built for reflex. To be penalized is not to be disliked. It's to be unseen by an economy that feeds on immediacy. Swipe culture compresses identity into milliseconds. The interface demands that we be legible before we can be known. The algorithm reads only what can be quantified: faces, activity, the brevity of charm. But nuance resists quantification. It hides between gestures, tone, and intention. When the essence of a person requires time to unfold, the machinery of instant judgment becomes hostile terrain. I've felt that quiet erasure, when depth becomes a liability in the shallow end of modern romance. Most of those listening are not 20 anymore. Between 35 and 64, you have no appetite for endless texting or performative curiosity. The hunger now is for alignment, of values, of rhythm, of truth spoken, without rehearsal. Small talk no longer feels civil. It feels costly. The wiser soul wants efficiency without losing integrity. The INFJ craves resonance. The INTJ, coherence. Both recoil at chaos disguised as connection. Yet the data no one likes, tells its own story. Attention concentrates on a fraction of profiles. Algorithms amplify the already visible, feeding a loop where surface cues multiply and subtlety disappears. The most active users rise, not the most authentic. Every silence is interpreted as absence. In this economy, stillness itself becomes a crime. The paradox: the more grounded you are, the less you circulate. So how does one navigate this paradox without surrendering self? That is the promise of the map to come. Through a philosophical lens, we'll expose the mechanical logic behind the feed, why it rewards imitation and punishes reflection. Then we'll rebuild profile design that signals soul, messaging that filters through authenticity, and an off app practice that restores serendipity. Sometimes it just hurts. The rare mind must not retreat into cynicism. To survive the feed, it must act as both strategist and mystic, seeing the system clearly, yet refusing to let it define worth. The work ahead is not to escape the algorithm, but to transcend it from within, one deliberate signal at a time. Kierkegaard wrote that the crowd is untruth, not as an indictment of people, but of the mechanism that dissolves the individual into noise. The moment a mass opinion governs perception, integrity becomes inconvenient. In the context of dating apps, this is not abstract theology, it is lived distortion. The feed doesn't ask, "Who are you?" It asks, "How many approve of you?" The subtle mind becomes background static, flattened by metrics that mistake repetition for truth. The tyranny of the crowd now hides behind scores, likes, and rankings. You are not meeting people, you are meeting aggregated opinions. Compatibility becomes a number, visibility, a reward for obedience. For the INFJ, this explains the ache of being unseen despite sincerity. For the INTJ, it exposes the system's bias toward conformity. Both discover that authenticity is algorithmically inefficient. I know this dissonance, when self-respect feels like sabotage in a world addicted to applause. If you've ever looked at your matches and thought, "How is this even possible?" That sense of being filtered out by speed. Hit the like button. It tells me you want more content. That explains the mechanics behind the chaos, not just the psychology. Kierkegaard drew a line between the aesthetic life, chasing novelty, and the ethical life, choosing principle. Within the app, this becomes a question of dignity. Will you chase the next dopamine flicker or design a slower signal of truth? For the INFJ, the answer begins with refusing to romanticize chaos. For the INTJ, it's an act of focus, rejecting vanity metrics in favor of long-term alignment. The feed wants engagement. The soul wants coherence. To reclaim individuality, we must become what Kierkegaard called the single individual, a conscious counterpoint to the crowd. Practically, this means designing profiles and habits that reveal intentionality rather than imitation. The way you choose a photo, reply to a message, or state a value becomes a philosophical act. For the INTJ, this is system building. For the INFJ, soul curation. Both are acts of quiet rebellion. One sentence of clarity can become armor. Try this. Before you edit or swipe, pause and ask, am I the single individual here, or just another echo in the feed? The question itself realigns the will. The aesthetic life dissolves into noise. The ethical one begins with a boundary. I have felt the temptation to conform, to sound lighter, quicker, more swipeable. But the moment I did, my words turned hollow. Authenticity isn't strategy, it's survival. The crowd will always try to define the terms of worth. Our task, as rare minds, is to use the same tools without worshiping their metrics, to remain private in public, slow in the storm. In the end, the algorithm only measures visibility. The spirit measures truth. Beneath every romantic myth the apps tell, there is an equation. It does not measure sincerity or timing. It measures movement, frequency, and shine. The code rewards the illusion of availability more than the substance of connection. For the INFJ and INTJ, this is the riddle. The quieter you are, the less the machine remembers you exist. The first variable is image. Faces in clear light with defined eyes and context outperform vague aesthetics by a wide margin. This is not vanity, it is visual language. The human brain, and by extension, the algorithm, interprets clarity as safety. A face half hidden in shadow reads as hesitation, yet depth can still speak through light. A book spine in the corner, a trace of natural sun on the cheek. These details whisper identity without noise. I've learned to stop hiding in abstraction. It's not mystery, it's camouflage. Then comes recency and frequency. The app thrives on motion. Each login, each edit, each conversation re-signals life to the algorithm. For an INTJ, this is cadence management, not self-promotion. For an INFJ, it's emotional budgeting. Enter, engage, and exit before depletion. Think of activity as a pulse, not a plea. Regular rhythm keeps you in the field of visibility without feeding the addiction of endless checking. The third mechanism is the fast response loop. Replies within the first hour extend thread survival by over half. The feed assumes silence means disinterest. INFJs can guard energy by preparing a few templated warmth openers, small gestures that preserve tone without overexposure. Evenings are when I write back. It keeps my day quieter. Simple, human, and algorithmically alive. Popularity bias follows. Once a profile gains early traction, the algorithm amplifies it exponentially. The INTJ sees this as an experiment. Small, consistent tweaks, first photo, bioline, timing, yield measurable results. Don't rebuild, iterate. The INFJ resists the urge to romanticize randomness and instead treats feedback as data, not destiny. And finally, the conformity bias. Extroverted signals, crowds, laughter, bright colors, perform better because they appear low risk. But subtle rebellion works. A serene background, one sentence of depth, eyes steady on the lens. Both types can project openness without imitation. The art is in adaptive authenticity, translating depth into signals the machine can recognize without losing the self. Sometimes, I just stare at the feed and feel the hum beneath it, the quiet machinery of approval grinding against the mystery of love. The sound is both seductive and sterile. To navigate this, treat algorithms as weather patterns. Understand them, but never kneel to them. Adjust the sails. Don't change the destination. What they reward is activity, but what sustains you is alignment. The rare mind must learn both rhythms, the pulse of visibility and the stillness of truth, and dance at the edge where one does not erase the other. The tragedy is quiet. Most INFJ and INTJ users believe they are being rejected, when in fact they are simply being misread by the system they never designed. Their natural habits, precision, restraint, introspection, translate as disengagement. In a feed trained to notice speed and sparkle, depth appears as static. What feels like integrity becomes algorithmic invisibility. Here, we don't chase trends, we decode them. When we break down how swipe interfaces compress identity and how INFJ INTJ nuance gets lost in seconds, you'll see patterns you can actually use. Subscribe if you want tools that turn self-awareness into practical strategy every week. Minimal or cryptic bios are the first trap. The INFJ hides behind poetry, seeking meaning in chaos. But to the machine, it's a blank field. Empty space is treated as absence, yet it takes only one concrete line to shift perception. Sundays are for reading and rebuilding. Clarity does not betray depth. It carries it. The same goes for the INTJ who polishes the perfect sentence for weeks. Perfectionism starves recency. The profile turns stale before it ever breathes. I've done this myself, waiting until everything felt exact, only to realize the moment had already passed. The second penalty is delay. Long response latency reads as indifference. The feed assumes silence is disinterest and moves your profile to the periphery. To reclaim ground, INFJs can frame their rhythm instead of apologizing for it. I reply evenings only. It keeps my energy honest. This redefines slowness as principle, not neglect. For INTJs, the fix is structural. Reply once per window, not once per week. Cadence, again, is currency. Privacy instincts also backfire. Both types often choose vague prompts to stay safe, yet vagueness makes you indistinguishable. Instead of, "I love travel," try "Kyoto in," "Rain taught me patience." Specificity becomes a filter, drawing the right minds and repelling noise. The paradox: revealing one real passion is safer than hiding behind 5 abstractions. Then comes the habit of early depth testing. Both types long for substance and turn first messages into interrogations. What drives you most in life? It's noble, but premature. Curiosity feels like pressure when context is thin. Replace interrogation with breadcrumbs, one sentence that hints at the question beneath. I'm drawn to people who notice details others miss. It invites reflection without demanding disclosure. Sometimes I catch myself editing every word until the tone feels invulnerable. But armor doesn't attract. It isolates. The practice here is gentle defiance. Show more signal, not more noise. Treat each interaction as calibration, not judgment. The INFJ can write shorter truths. The INTJ can launch imperfect drafts. Together they reclaim motion without losing essence. In this world, the penalty is not for being rare, it's for being still. But stillness can learn to speak in motion's dialect. When you master that translation, the feed stops punishing you. It begins to reveal those few who were listening all along. Every profile is a philosophical artifact. It tells the machine what to show, and tells the world what you believe deserves to be seen. Most people write for approval. The rare mind must write for recognition, the quiet, wordless kind that occurs when two inner landscapes align. The first image is your thesis. Algorithms read the face before they read the bio. Eyes in focus, natural light, a trace of context, a hand on a book, a walk through dusk. The goal is not seduction, but legibility of presence. When the image carries integrity, the viewer feels invited, not persuaded. For both INFJs and INTJs, this is the moment where self-knowledge becomes signal. I once changed nothing but lighting, from shadow to dawn, and the matches that followed were suddenly human again. Next comes the depth hook. One line, no manifesto. I track meaning the way others track metrics. A phrase like this acts as an encryption key. It filters who can read you. The INFJ radiates soul. The INTJ transmits edge. Both types invite curiosity through precision. Too much story and you exhaust attention. Too little and you vanish. The art lies in saying the smallest true thing possible. Then, the anchor. Add one niche, book, discipline, or place that orients your signal in a sea of sameness. A Dostoevsky mention, a city you return to, a field you love. It is not branding, it's frequency alignment. Algorithms use it for categorization, souls use it for recognition. The right detail narrows the gate, but deepens the welcome. Structure your visuals as a 5-tile story. Face, full body, pursuit, social proof, quiet moment, competence and warmth in balance. The INTJ often forgets the warmth, the INFJ, the competence. Together they form coherence. Each image should reveal a fragment of rhythm, motion, connection, solitude. The feed will read it as diversity. The viewer will feel it as life. End with specificity. Replace vague invitations with grounded propositions. Coffee and a bookstore browse? It does not trivialize you, it simplifies choice. It's a ritual cue signaling initiative and gentleness. In an age of ambiguity, clarity feels like care. I've noticed that when a profile reflects genuine architecture, I breathe differently. The noise recedes. The person emerges. The practice: rebuild your profile as a small philosophy of self. Every element, word, image, tone, should teach the algorithm how to recognize your kind of presence. The goal is not to impress, but to endure. Depth, translated into clarity, becomes resilience. When done well, you stop chasing the feed. It begins to orbit you. The conversation begins before the words. The tone, rhythm, and timing of your first reply already signal who you are. For the rare mind, this is where fatigue often starts. Not from rejection, but from carrying too much meaning into too small a space. The goal is not to talk more, it's to talk precisely, to filter with grace instead of exhaustion. I want to know, which penalty hits you hardest? Being misunderstood, overlooked, or drained by surface-level talk? Drop it in the comments. I'm reading through them to shape the next episode on how introverted depth can still win in fast platforms. The two-sentence opener is the simplest antidote. Mirror one concrete detail from their profile, then pose a low-pressure question. You mentioned you love early mornings. What's the first sound you notice? For INFJs, this keeps warmth alive without emotional overextension. For INTJs, it introduces structure, input, observation, inquiry. It's a miniature algorithm of authenticity, designed for resonance, not volume. I've found that one sincere observation cuts through more noise than 10 clever lines. Time boundaries sustain this clarity. Replies lose energy when stretched across endless hours. Set a rhythm. 20 minutes in the evening, perhaps twice a week. This consistency tells the algorithm you're alive while protecting your mental space. The INFJ can treat it as a ritual of intention. The INTJ as a task with defined edges. Presence, then retreat. Every act of pacing becomes an act of self-respect. Think in arcs, not fragments. A good exchange follows the rhythm. Notice. Niche. Next, you begin with observation, link to shared ground, and end with a tangible proposal. I saw you mentioned hiking. There's a quiet trail outside the city I've been meaning to revisit. The line transforms abstraction into trajectory. The conversation gains direction without pressure. Avoid the interrogator's trap. Many INFJs and INTJs overcompensate for small talk by diving into existential questions too soon. Replace interrogation with micro-stories. A recent moment that changed my mind. Such snippets reveal reflection without demanding confession. They invite reciprocity instead of performance. Once connection forms, boundaries keep it real. Define a principle, not a rule. I prefer to meet after 5 to 7 messages. It keeps things human. This phrase balances intuition and logic. It filters out the perpetual texters and draws those willing to meet you in reality. Sometimes, after sending a message, I close the app and feel the quiet click of relief. The echo fades, and the mind returns home. The practice: message as a philosopher, not a performer. Each exchange is a small experiment in sincerity, testing whether the soul on the other side can sustain presence beyond the pixel. The rare mind's aim is not to impress, but to conserve signal for those who can hear it. When you speak from clarity, even the algorithm becomes your witness. Data is not the enemy, dependence is. The modern INFJ and INTJ often recoil from metrics, equating numbers with manipulation. Yet numbers, used wisely, can become mirrors, objective traces of where energy either circulates or drains. The danger lies not in measuring, but in forgetting what the measurement is for. Begin simply. Observe the ratios that matter: views to likes, matches to first messages, messages to meets. These are not judgments of worth, but indicators of clarity. For INTJs, such tracking is architecture, a map of inefficiency. For INFJs, it's a mirror of resonance. What kinds of exchanges actually feel alive? The goal is not optimization for popularity, but for vitality. I once discovered that my highest response rates came from the lines I wrote fastest. Depth, it turns out, travels better when it breathes. Treat small changes as experiments. Each week, alter one element. First photo, hook line, time of reply. Observe outcomes quietly. INTJs will appreciate the system. INFJs, the pattern of energy. The compounding effect is real. Micro-adjustments teach the feed to read your signal without requiring self-erasure. Tiny consistency is more powerful than grand reinvention. Activity timing matters. Log in twice a day in small, deliberate windows, morning and evening, never impulsively. The app interprets regular cadence as reliability. More importantly, you protect your nervous system from random emotional floods. Think of it as tending a fire. Brief attention, steady flame. Adopt the principle of do less but better. One rich prompt is worth 5 vague ones. One sincere match outweighs 50 fleeting swipes. This rule harmonizes INFJ depth with INTJ focus. It converts strategy into self-respect. Finally, redefine success. Count values-aligned conversations or meaningful meetups per month, not matches. A connection that honors your essence is not less successful because it's rare. It's rarer because it honors essence. The algorithm can count frequency. Only you can measure truth. Sometimes I watch the graphs, the percentages, the little arrows, and remind myself, this is not my heart. It's just its shadow in data form. The practice. Treat metrics as lanterns, not gods. They illuminate where you are, but cannot dictate where to go. The rare mind's task is to master feedback without surrendering to it, to read patterns without letting them rewrite meaning. In a world obsessed with growth curves, stillness remains the rarest metric of all. At some point, even the most optimized profile meets its ceiling. Algorithms can facilitate encounters, but they cannot generate the texture of chance, the scent of coffee, the hesitation before a shared idea. For INFJs and INTJs, meaning rarely blooms inside scripted systems. It needs the oxygen of the unscheduled. The solution is not withdrawal, but redirection. Curate environments that move at your natural speed. Book salons, volunteer circles, cause-based gatherings, places where dialogue grows organically and values surface through action. The INFJ feels safer when empathy is embedded in context. The INTJ when purpose organizes. Interaction. Both rediscover what the apps cannot simulate. Continuity. Interest clusters work the same way. Language exchanges, hiking groups, maker nights. Repeated exposure converts acquaintances into familiarity. The introverted mind thrives when connection unfolds over time, not under pressure. One quiet conversation beside a trail or over soldering smoke can replace months of digital fatigue. I remember a single workshop where shared silence spoke louder than 100 messages. When we guys in Delray reach the final section, the Rare Mind dating system, you'll want to apply it in real time. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the follow-up episode where we test these principles with real profiles and data. Leverage your network too. Friend-of-friend introductions when framed with a short paragraph of intent, preserve privacy while enhancing precision. She values depth and design. He values clarity and calm. Such bridges bypass randomness and reintroduce discernment. Serendipity, after all, is rarely pure accident, it is prepared chance. Physical venues also carry psychological logic. Choose spaces aligned with your narrative. Museum nights, acoustic cafes, philosophy meetups. The INFJ avoids sensory overload. The INTJ optimizes for signal-to-noise ratio. Both conserve presence. Noise is not social, it's entropy. Keep structure gentle but real. One event per month, one follow-up within 2 days. The act of showing up rhythmically keeps the heart engaged without overextension. This isn't networking, it's cultivating coincidence. Sometimes when I step into a room lit by warm lamps and low music, I feel time slow. The same silence I chase online suddenly becomes physical. The practice. Treat the digital as initiation, not destination. Apps are gates. Life is the terrain. To build off-platform serendipity is to reclaim sovereignty over how love enters your orbit. The algorithm measures activity. The soul measures attention. When you re-enter the physical world with intention, even randomness begins to align. Every system has its shadows, and dating apps are no exception. For the rare mind, Traps appear disguised as self-doubt. What feels like personal inadequacy is often just friction between depth and design. Understanding these edge cases frees both INFJs and INTJs from unnecessary shame and converts weakness into navigation. The first is the "I don't photograph well" dilemma. Many INFJs feel unseen in still images because their magnetism lives in movement, in tone, gaze, silence. The antidote isn't glamour, it's context. A candid moment, a book in hand, natural light on skin. Action restores warmth. For INTJs, competence is charisma. Capture yourself mid-focus. Assembling, explaining, building. Authenticity photographed is more persuasive than performance posed. Next comes the paradox of choice. Swiping endlessly dulls intuition. Too many options flatten discernment. The INFJ begins to feel spiritually anesthetized. The INTJ, strategically paralyzed. The solution? Set a cap. 10 profiles per session. No scrolling beyond. This restraint preserves curiosity and keeps each decision conscious. Then there's false depth, the poetic vagueness meant to sound soulful, searching for meaning beneath the stars. Such lines seduce but don't select. Replace them with one measurable value. I volunteer weekly. Meaning grows through service. Precision is intimacy. Ambiguity only mimics it. Age anxiety follows quietly. Many in the 35-64 spectrum internalize invisibility as decline. But attraction is not chronology, it's coherence. Showcase vitality through direction, not youth. An INFJ radiates when mission replaces nostalgia. An INTJ becomes magnetic when purpose reads as momentum. The algorithm reads brightness. The world feels orientation. Safety is the final, sacred concern. Use pacing as protection. Brief video calls before meeting, public settings, clarity of intention. This isn't paranoia. It's stewardship of intuition and logic working in harmony. One verifies, the other feels. Together they build trust with precision. I've ignored that inner warning before, mistaking intuition for fear. The cost was silence that lingered longer than the encounter. The practice: transform each objection into architecture. Your hesitations are data, not defects. When photographed motion replaces insecurity, when limits preserve discernment, when truth replaces vagueness, and when pacing honors safety, you stop fighting the medium and begin bending it. The apps were not built for souls like ours, but that only makes the strategy holier, to inhabit them without becoming them. Sometimes I think, maybe the algorithm doesn't hate depth, it just never learned its language. Our task is to teach it, one deliberate signal at a time. After so much noise, the temptation is to retreat entirely, to conclude that the digital realm is irredeemable. But the true work begins here, integrating what the machine taught us, without letting it rewrite who we are. The rare mind's task is not exile, it's mastery. Begin with rhythm. 2 profile tweaks, 2 message sessions, 1 in-person event per week. Nothing heroic, just consistent motion. For INTJs, it satisfies the need for structure. For INFJs, it preserves emotional pacing. The aim is to move steadily enough for the algorithm to recognize you, yet slowly enough for your spirit to recover between gestures. Cadence replaces chaos. Next, guard identity with a 3-line creed. Write it privately, never post it. Something like, I value quiet truth over performative warmth. I build slowly. I'd rather miss a match than misplace myself. Read it before editing your profile. It functions as a compass against the soft corrosion of crowd logic. Every digital act becomes a moral one. Then, apply the Kierkegaard check. Am I the single individual here? This is not an aesthetic rebellion, but an existential audit. When you sense yourself optimizing for approval, pause. The crowd's algorithm rewards sameness. The individual's algorithm rewards congruence. True visibility begins when integrity overrides impulse. I've caught myself bending tone, softening belief, smiling for the feed, and each time, that question pulled me back to center. Define non-negotiables. Time, values, deal breakers. The INFJ needs these to prevent emotional overreach. The INTJ to prevent strategic drift. Write them as boundaries, not barricades. No conversations past midnight. Shared curiosity required. Kindness non-optional. When limits are clear, discernment becomes intuitive. And finally, Transmute insight into movement. This week, rebuild your 5-tile story and schedule one values-aligned meetup. Coffee with intention, not performance. Let practice translate philosophy. Momentum clarifies what reflection alone cannot. One paragraph of simplicity. I once walked into a small bookstore after weeks of digital noise. The air smelled of paper and cedar. Someone at the next shelf smiled, not performatively, but with presence. It reminded me why I began this exploration at all. Sometimes the algorithm leads us back to the analog heart. The practice, build a loop between spirit and system. Strategy without soul becomes vanity. Soul without structure dissolves into longing. Integration means rhythm, data serving meaning, action preserving depth. When INFJ empathy and INTJ design merge, something rare emerges, a form of digital grace. And if I could leave one sentence to echo through this entire map, it would be this: the world may swipe for speed, but love still answers to slowness. As we get into Kierkegaard's warning, the crowd is untruth. Think of someone who's quietly brilliant but keeps saying apps just don't work. Send them this video. It might be the first time they realize it's not them, it's the system.